All right, we have our next movie motion picture, section 9.4, percent equation. And kind of similar to 9.2, where we were using algebra to solve for either the part, the whole, or the percent, except we used proportions in that section. This section we actually have an equation that does the same thing for us. Now the letters and the parts are all the same. And the percent equation is if you multiply the percentage, which is that p-value there, times the whole, which is b, it'll give you the part. Okay, so let's go ahead and label those things. So in this case, a is still the part, b is still the base or the whole. Sloppy there, sorry. And p is the biggest difference here. P is still the percentage, or the percent value, written as a decimal though, which you just learned last section. So it's the percent written as a decimal. And if you're solving for the percent, that answer will often end up as a decimal as well, and then you can just turn it into a percent. Okay? So the key thing when you're looking here is, like we've talked about in class, is look for that question word. So what is being asked? Is it asking what percent, which means you're going to try to solve for that guy? Is the what number coming second, like in this example down here, meaning you're going to try to solve for B? Or does what number, if I can find one here, come first? I don't have an example like that right now, but we'll try to solve for all those different things. So in this first example, hopefully I didn't make you dizzy here, we have what percent. So that should give it away right now that you're going to be trying to solve for the p-value. All right, so we're going to plug in this for our b and this for our a into our equation up here. So what we're going to have is 54 is equal to p times 150, which we should really write as proper algebra. 54 equals 150p. So then, again, we have a one-step algebra problem. We need to divide both sides by 150. Divide both sides by 150. That crosses out. And we're going to get p equals, and you should notice, and again, you're welcome to do this with a calculator, you should notice what the answer is. If you take 150, or if you take 54 divided by 150, you're going to get a decimal. You're going to get 0.36, okay, which actually equals 36%. Because again, this value has to be written and solved as a decimal, but then it actually equals 36% if you remember our notes from yesterday. So let's take a look at another example. So in this case, the what number is at the end, which means we don't know the b value. So we do know the a value, and then obviously this is the percent. So we're going to plug in 130 for a. We're going to plug in, here's the key difference, instead of 65%, we're going to plug in 0.65 because it has to be written as a decimal, times b. Getting kind of confusing there. That's a decimal. That's a multiply. All right, and so we're going to now have to do a little division here and divide 0.65 by both sides. Divide 0.65 by both sides, and it's going to leave us with b equals. And again, I would highly recommend using a calculator. As long as you're showing all this work that I'm showing here, you're allowed to use a calculator. And so b would equal 200. Another example, finding that question phrase there, what percent, which means we don't know the percentage. We do know the part, and we do know the whole. So again, plugging it into that equation, 50 equals some percentage value times 250, or 250p really. But we're going to divide both sides by 250. Divide both sides by 250, so that'll cancel out. And p will be, after we divide, and you'll notice you should be getting a decimal again, which we can then turn into a percent. So if you divide 50 by 250, you will get 0.2, which is actually 20%. Okay, so we would say 50 is 20% of the way to 250. So again, here's another where what number kind of comes at the end. So that should be a giveaway that you're trying to solve. It's supposed to be an arrow. Solve for B. And we know the percentage. We know the part. 24 equals, again, this needs to be written as a decimal, 0.30. What we don't know is B. So we need to get B by itself by dividing both sides by 0.30. To cross that out, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So then B equals, after you plug that in, and again, recommend using your calculator, save a little time, would equal 80. So 24 is 30% of the way to 80 is how that would look. Okay? All right, a few story problems here, which we can use percentages, and we can still use that A equals percentage P times B equation. I'm just going to write that up there for you. So if you made a 20% deposit on a rock climbing lesson, okay, but the cost of the lesson is $65 total, what is the amount of your deposit? So we know the percentage, we know the total amount, and so what we don't know is the part. Okay, so we have A, because we don't know the part that we paid. The deposit is like a little bit you put down before you go. And we know the percentage, and of course written as a decimal. Whoops. And we also know the whole, which is 65. And so there isn't really any algebra here. We just need to multiply 0.2 by 65, which would give us A equals, doing the math here, of 0.2 times 65, $13. So if the store made you put down a 20% deposit, then you would need to pay $13 of that 65 in order to meet their requirements. Okay, so another story problem here. A salesperson sells a laptop computer for $3,100. The commission on the sale is 8%. How much is the commission? So the commission is basically how much a salesperson makes, but based on the total amount. And so in this case, they're going to make 8% of what it was sold at. And so to figure out actually how much money that is, we can plug it in to our formula here. So what we know the total amount. What we don't know is the part that he makes, the 8%. So again, we don't know the part, which is represented by A. We do know the percentage. Don't get tricked out here. It's 0.08. 0.8 would be 80%, which is not what we're looking for, times 3,100 is our whole number, or our base. So again, we can just kind of do the math there. There's no solving or anything. We can just kind of multiply it out, which is kind of nice. 0.08 times 3,100 equals, and since it's a story problem, I'm going to use a label, $248 if I multiply those two numbers together. All right, last example here, and actually get a nice little multiple choice here. A travel journalist wrote 108 travel articles last year, and 64 of them were published in magazines. Which best represents the percent of articles, oops, typo there, that were not published in magazines? So what we need to do is first find the percentage of ones that were, Okay, and so if we kind of plug, this would represent our whole value, this would represent our part, all right, of ones that were published. So there's a couple ways of going about doing this actually. We could figure out how many were not. So if 108 total magazines and 64 were published, to find out the ones that were not published, you could subtract 108 and 64, and that would give you 44 that were not published. So now we can plug this into our formula to find the percentage. So what we don't know is the percent. We know the part, 44. We don't know the percentage, but we do know the whole. So I have a one-step multiplication algebra problem where I need to divide both sides by 108, divide both sides by 108, and 44 divided by 108 is, again, it's going to give me a decimal. We might need to round a little bit here to get our exact answer here. But if you find that out, it's P equals 0.407, but again, that's as a decimal, so you would need to write that as moving the decimal over twice to make a percent, and you'd have 40.7%, which would be closest to that guy. All right, so again, talking about whole, parts, and percentages, and plugging it into our equation here. Okay, so hopefully you got all that, and we will see you tomorrow.